Christians believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross and then he was resurrected 3 days after his death. He later rose up to heaven and was seated at the right hand of God. On the other hand, the vast majority of Muslims have taken to the belief that Jesus Christ was not put at the cross at all. Another person who was a look-alike had been crucified by the Jews, while the real Jesus had been raised to heaven bodily by God the Almighty. Both of these beliefs are contradictory, not only to logic, but also to understanding and indeed the laws of nature. They are also totally negated by historical evidence. Let's watch and examine what are the facts involved here. Even a superficial study of the various verses of the Gospels reveals that although Jesus Christ was indeed hung upon the cross, he did not die upon the cross and was still alive when he was taken off the cross. This is the established practice of God the Almighty, that he safeguards his beloved servants when they are faced with terrible dangers. And in this very world, he takes them out of that predicament, especially Jesus Christ. He had been told by the God Almighty far in advance, much before the crucifixion, that like Jonah, he will also be on the verge of death and will be saved miraculously by the divine intervention. Hence, when the Jewish clergy demanded a sign, the response given by Jesus Christ was that no sign will be given except that of Jonah. Thus, Matthew chapter 12, verses 38 to 40 says,
Then some of the Pharisees and teachers of the law said to him, Teacher, we want to see a miraculous sign from you. He answered, A wicked and adulterous generation asks for a miraculous sign, but none will be given it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth.
Whether Christian or Muslim, everyone knows that apparently when there was no hope of survival, Jonah remained alive in the belly of the fish, until the fish threw him up out of its belly near the coast while he was still alive. This prophecy of Jesus Christ indicated categorically that God the Almighty had informed him well in advance he would live in the belly of the earth in a near-death state, but like Jonah, he will surface alive. Indeed, the events that followed reflect an exact fulfillment of the prophecy. Upon consulting various verses contained in the Gospels, a crystal clear picture begins to emerge. A picture which shows that the divinely instigated circumstances were to become the basis of Christ's deliverance from the death upon the cross. The events reveal that when the pressure reached enormous proportions upon Pilate by the Jewish clergy, demanding that Jesus be crucified for a crime, desecrating the faith, and creating rifts among the Jews, then at such a crucial point, Pilate received a message from his wife that Jesus is righteous. Therefore, he must not get involved in pronouncing a death sentence upon him. She further indicated that she had seen a dream about Jesus Christ being righteous. Hence, it is said in Matthew chapter 27, verse 19.
While Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him this message, Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him.
Not only this, but it is also a historical fact that Pilate had a very soft spot for Jesus, which is clearly borne by John chapter 19, verse 12, where it is stated that in spite of the knowledge that the Jews were not prepared to tolerate any lenience at all for Jesus, Pilate still desired to set him free, as is recorded in this verse, which reads,
From then on Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jews kept shouting, If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar.
Pontius Pilate was a governor of Caesar and was responsible for maintaining law and order. When he saw that he had become utterly helpless against the bloodthirsty element in the Jews, and that there was an imminent danger of riots, he made the public announcement of absolving himself from the crime of shedding the blood of Jesus, and openly gave expression of sympathy to Jesus. Thus, Matthew chapter 27, verse 24 says,
When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. I am innocent of this man's blood, he said. It is your responsibility. All the people answered, Let his blood be on us and on our children.
For Pontius Pilate the governor to publicly refer to Jesus as righteous, then making a concerted effort to have the matter resolved without crucifixion, are massively important points which are not to be underestimated and should be noted in order to understand the future events as they took place. All the known versions of the Gospels are agreed that Jesus Christ was placed on the cross on Friday halfway through the afternoon and was taken down the same day before sunset. That is to say, that he stayed on the cross for 3 to 6 hours at most. This is because it was a practice amongst the Jews that in accordance with the Torah, they would take down anybody whom they had crucified before the sunset on Friday, because after that starts Saturday, which is the Sabbath day for them. And in accordance with the teachings of the Torah, they consider it essential to take the crucified people down from the cross. This is mentioned in John chapter 19, verse 31, which says,
Now it was the day of preparation, and the next day was to be a special Sabbath. Because the Jews did not want the bodies left on the crosses during the Sabbath, they asked Pilate to have the legs broken and the bodies taken down.
At this juncture, it seems pertinent to wonder and ask, what were the factors which became the cause of death at these crucifixions? And generally, how long did it take the death to result? Furthermore, why were the legs broken before the person was taken down from the cross? We can find the clarification of these questions at a reconstruction presented by the Christians at the Philippines at Easter every year. Every year at Easter, Christians in the Philippines reenact the crucifixion of Jesus as described in the Gospels. They actually volunteer to be crucified. They do it because they believe it will help them to purge their sins. For the onlookers, it is a bloody and brutal reminder of what happened to Jesus 2,000 years ago. Nails are hammered into the hands and feet. In the Philippines, they use real nails. They do experience the real pain that Jesus felt. In fact, a man nailed to the cross does not die from his wounds. He dies surprisingly from suffocation. Hanging just by arms from a cross, one's chest is compressed. It becomes hard to breathe without supporting the body weight on the legs. Over time, the strain on the legs and the pain make it impossible to breathe. In the Philippines, the volunteers are brought down from their crosses within an hour. Death from crucifixion takes much longer, often several days. The only way to hasten death on the cross was to break the legs, making it immediately impossible to support the body weight and therefore to breathe. But the Gospels are all agreed that Jesus died after only 3 to 6 hours, and that his legs were also not broken, while both the other men who were crucified with Jesus had their legs broken. This is recorded in John chapter 19, verses 32 to 33, which says,
The soldiers therefore came and broke the legs of the first man who had been crucified with Jesus, and then those of the other. But when they came to Jesus and found that he was already dead, they did not break his legs.
The question then is it a sufficient evidence of death if a person is absolutely motionless? Is it quite possible that Jesus Christ had passed out due to the agonizing sufferings of the crucifixion, and the soldiers supposed him to be dead and did not, as a result, break his legs? Or the other possibility is that Pilate, as he believed Jesus to be righteous, might have secretly told the centurion not to do so. In any case, one point is certain, that a man cannot die in such a short time on a cross if his legs are not broken. Another incident, shortly before Jesus was taken down from the cross, provides further testimony which proves categorically that although he was motionless, he was indeed still alive and his heart was still beating. As it is said in John chapter 19, verse 34, that when a soldier pierced his side, blood and water gushed forth. For blood and water to gush forth is a clear indication of a beating heart, and indeed indicative of circulation. The New Testament speaks of it in a verse that says,
Instead, one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with a spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water.
Not only that, but when Joseph came to Pilate requesting the body to be handed over, Pilate expressed his surprise and asked how come he had died so quickly. As it is recorded by Mark chapter 15, verse 44, which says,
Pilate was surprised to hear that he was already dead.
This incredulous expression of Pilate also proves that the person who was on the cross for such a short span of time could not possibly have died without having his legs broken. Another pointer which proves that Jesus Christ was still alive is found in the report that the sepulchre where Jesus was taken was visited at night by Joseph and Nicodemus, who brought around 50 kilos of myrrh and aloes compounded together and applied it to his body. This is recorded by John chapter 19, verse 39, which says,
And there came also Nicodemus, which at the first came to Jesus by night, and brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 weight.
Myrrh is a very well-known medicinal herb used in ointments and poultices for dressing of wounds in Greek medicines. It has been used for centuries. In books of herbal medicine, some of which are renowned books of Greek medicine, there is a mention of an ointment labeled Marham Isa, in other words, ointment of Jesus, in which myrrh is the dominant ingredient. The books have recorded that this ointment was applied to the wounds of Jesus. In the time after the incident of crucifixion, a book was published in Roman language, which also contained a recipe for preparation of an ointment. And it is noted in there that this recipe was prepared for application to wounds of Jesus. To apply myrrh to the wounds of Jesus Christ to assist in healing proves that the disciples Joseph and Nicodemus knew that he was alive, but due to the dangers faced from the Jews, they kept it secret. And on Friday night, very quietly, they applied the ointment on his wounds and placed him in a cave-like sepulchre and placed a stone on its mouth. The sequence of events as recorded in the Gospels grant absolute proof to the belief that Jesus Christ was taken down alive from the cross and was still alive when he was placed in the sepulchre. Because in accordance to these records, not only did he later disappear from the sepulchre, but he also met some of his disciples. He shows them his wounds and asks them for food. He also disguises himself so that the Jews would not recognize him. Briefly, the events which took place were as follows. Early on Sunday morning, in other words, 2 nights and 1 day after the crucifixion, when Mary Magdalene goes to the sepulchre, she finds the stone removed from the mouth of the sepulchre, and Jesus not present inside, as is described in John chapter 20, verses 1 through 7, which says,
Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him. So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. Then Simon Peter, who was behind him, arrived and went into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the burial cloth that had been around Jesus' head. The cloth was folded by itself, separate from the linen.
These verses of the Gospel are proof that Jesus Christ was alive, while he may have been unconscious while he was placed inside the sepulchre. That is the reason why, when he regained consciousness, he removed the sheets in which he had been wrapped, and he shifted the stone on the mouth of the sepulchre and went out. Most Christians believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross, and then on the third day he was resurrected with his spiritual body. If this belief is to be taken as true, then the stone on the mouth of the sepulchre should not have been removed, because for a non-physical spirit there was no need to remove the stone in order to come out. Not only this, but for Jesus Christ to disguise himself when he met Mary Magdalene is an undeniable proof that after surviving the crucifixion, he feared that the Jews would catch him again. If it were true, as the Christians believe, that he had been resurrected with his spiritual body and not the physical body, then there was no need for him to disguise himself out of the fear that the Jews would catch him again. As it is recorded by John chapter 20, verse 14 to 16, which says,
At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there. But she did not realize that it was Jesus. "Woman," he said, "why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher.
This testimony doesn't end here. In another incident recorded in the Gospel, Jesus Christ himself negates the idea that the person the disciples could see after the event of crucifixion was a spirit or any apparition. He said to them, "I am not a spirit, but a man of flesh and bone, and still carry the wounds of the crucifixion on the hands and the feet." This is recorded in Luke chapter 24, verses 36 to 43, which says,
While they were still talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." They were startled and frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. He said to them, "Why are you troubled? And why do doubts rise in your minds? Look at my hands and my feet. It is I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have." When he had said this, he showed them his hands and feet. And while they still did not believe it because of joy and amazement, he asked them, "Do you have anything here to eat?" They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it in their presence.
Hence, after crucifixion, for Jesus Christ to have met disciples together with all human signs and requirements is undeniable proof that he had escaped alive from the crucifixion. If in fact Jesus Christ had escaped from the crucifixion alive, his first priority should have been to get away from the Roman jurisdiction, because the Jews had already acquired a death sentence for him under the Roman jurisdiction. When we look up the map, we find Palestine at the eastern edge of the Roman Empire, so traveling further towards the east would have taken him out of the Roman jurisdiction. Not only was it essential for him to escape the death sentence imposed on him, but there was another very compelling reason due to which he had to undertake this journey. He had to travel to look for the 10 tribes which had migrated to the east much before his coming and were referred to as the lost sheep of Israel. Even before the crucifixion, Jesus Christ had made known his determination about this, as is recorded by John chapter 10, verse 16, where he says,
I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice. And there shall be one flock and one shepherd.
Hence, if Jesus Christ considered himself the messenger to Israelites, as is verified by the Gospels and the Holy Koran, then after deliverance from the cross, it is most fitting for him to have traveled to Afghanistan and Kashmir. Our viewers might be surprised to learn that the migration of Jesus Christ towards Kashmir was not only an inference, but a historic fact, the proofs of which have been preserved by history at so many steps along the way. For keeping the present review brief, here we will present only two of such references. The first we will take up here is the book titled Bhavishya Maha Purana, which was written in the 2nd century AD, comprising of historical events. The book speaks of a meeting of Raja Shah Bahan around the 1st century with a man called Isa, in other words, Jesus, who tells the king that he had come from the west, he was born of a virgin, and also that his people persecuted him, and that he is the Messiah. Similarly, the first most authentic and complete work of the history of this area, called the History of Kashmir, has stated that the grave in Srinagar, which is referred to as the grave of Yus Asaf, is the grave of that prophet to Israelites whose one name was Isa, in other words, Jesus, and that he had arrived here from the Holy Land. This would be a point worthy of note, that in Srinagar there is a tomb, generally called Raza Bal, where at the grave there is a plaque, upon which the inscription written in Persian reads as, "This is the grave of Yus Asaf." It is known amongst the people that this is the grave of a prophet. This prophet was sent to Kashmir. Even today, this holds the status of the grave of a prophet. Mr. Aziz Kashmiri of Srinagar University states that the grave known to be that of Yus Asaf is in fact the grave of Jesus. He says,
तमाम कश्मीर की तारीखों में यही लिखा है कि ये बाहर से आया है, ये प्रॉफिट था, ये पैगंबर था, और इस्राइल से आया, नस्वेन से अंदर बॉर्डर में आया है, और फिर यही तबलीग कर रहा है, वही जीसस है, वही मसीह भी है, क्योंकि यूस असद के माने हैं जो कोड़ी के मर्ज में हूँ, उनको शिफा देने वाला, उनका इलाज करने वाला, जो शफायाब हुए। यूस असद के दूसरे माने हैं जमा करने वाला।
In this tomb there is another important relic, which is a stone upon which are the carved footprints of Yus Asaf. About these footprints, Mr. Aziz Kashmiri says,
अच्छी उम्र में ये फोत हो गया है और उसके पाँव के निशानात का पत्थर पर उन्होंने कुंदा कर रखे हैं, जैसे कि थे वैसे ही रखे हैं निशान के तौर पर। उनमें जख्मों के निशानात बिल्कुल साफ नजर आते हैं, जो सलीब पर चढ़ाने की वजह से उनके पाँव में जख्म आए थे।
The position of the scars just behind the toes do not match each other, but they would align if a single nail was driven through both feet, with the left foot placed on top of the right. After the crucifixion, Jesus traveling to Kashmir with his mother is also mentioned in the Holy Koran, where God says,
"And we made the son of Mary and his mother a sign, and gave them shelter on an elevated land of green valleys and springs of running water."
In this verse, God the Almighty has spoken of the miraculous refuge granted to Jesus and his mother. The word shelter, used here, as the inherent meaning of being saved from some calamity, while the word sign refers to some miracle, as to say, God Almighty has stated that we gave deliverance to Jesus and his mother from such a calamity that this was nothing less than a miracle. Then it has also been pointed out that after being delivered miraculously from that calamity, God granted them peaceful abode, at a place of high altitude with springs flowing around. Clearly, after the suffering of crucifixion, the miraculous deliverance and then migration to an area like Kashmir is pointed out in this verse, where there are mountains and springs all around. For Jesus Christ to disguise himself after crucifixion is also a proof of his migration, that he did not want to appear amongst the people openly, as it is recorded in the Gospels. Prophets of God are never afraid of their opponents and do not hide away from them. The only time they hide is at the time of migration, when they try to get away secretly, like is evident at the migrations of Moses and Muhammad, peace be upon them. Hence, it is only the imminent migration when prophets are required to maintain secrecy and go into hiding. Therefore, after crucifixion, for Jesus Christ to remain disguised and not to make his appearance known to the general public and the opposing Jews is a clear proof that he had received guidance from God to migrate. If he was not to undertake migration on earth, but was to ascend to heaven, then what was the need to remain disguised and to hide from the opponents? On the contrary, this was then his chance to ascend to heaven, in front of public, while the opponents would have watched helplessly in the utter humiliation.